Argentina versus France. That is our World Cup final. Two of the major powers have got all the way to the end. But unfortunately for me, I fell ill a few days ago, which got in the way of making this video. I've had to change the plan quite a bit, and while I'll be bringing the usual level of depth in this video, it will be purely podcast style, so just audio, just my voice, and unfortunately no graphics this time. But don't worry, it'll still be full of a lot of juicy tactical discussion. The plan is to cover the evolution of both teams throughout the tournament, and then the all-important tactical preview, where I think the game could be won and lost. So before we get started, a quick shout out to the video sponsor, OneFootball. The OneFootball app is the undisputed world champion of football apps. It's just absolutely everything you need to follow your favourite team and the game globally in one place. You've got all the latest news, fixtures, scores and stats, and by selecting the club you support, you can get the news that matters to you directly in your notifications. But there's more, because you can watch highlights from selected competitions, social media videos, original OneFootball content, and depending on your location, you can even stream live matches from European and worldwide competitions. So you can go ahead and download the OneFootball app for free using the first link in the description, and as always, thank you to OneFootball for supporting the channel. I'm going to start with France because I haven't talked about them at all this tournament. I sort of see them as the pantomime villains, if you like, but what they're doing is obviously very effective, and making it to back-to-back finals is a huge achievement. And once again, we're talking here about a team that are pretty much prioritised being hard to beat, but I'd say they're maybe the most conservative team that we've covered, even more so than Morocco, who we talked about last video. Their defensive line on average is pretty low. They don't make a lot of pressures. They're happy to let teams pass it around the back. And in terms of territory, they're not in the opponent's final third too often. That said though, their level of conservatism is definitely dependent on game state. So in the last two knockout games against Morocco and against England, they've gone ahead early, and that has allowed a definite shift in mentality. The defensive line drops, and any token pressure from the forwards just disappears. But before then, to be fair, there are some signs of them being a bit more aggressive at the beginning of games. They do tend to be a mid-block rather than a low block. But yeah, that doesn't always last the entire game. What they're most concerned about, defending-wise, is defending their own half. So I'll go ahead and say straight away that it's generally a man-to-man setup from the French. Anyone behind the ball they're not worried about, but they will mark those ahead of it. So that's generally the opposition 8s, the wingers and the centre forward. They'll all be shadowed by a French player. If any of those players do decide to drop behind the ball, so an example would be Henderson for England, was doing that a lot. He was dropping into the back line to pick up the ball. The French midfielders won't follow them. They'll just leave them and then pick up whoever drifts into the space ahead of the ball. And they're very good at this. They're very smart in who they press. The communication must be great because they're passing on players all the time, and it means that any opposition forward won't have time on the ball. They'll be pressured pretty much immediately. So I'll talk about a couple of specific roles just to give you a clearer idea of what's going on. Starting with Mbappe, who's a good reference point. He doesn't generally drop into midfield when France are defending, so he'll stay in the front line, but he will still be on the left, and he'll generally be pressuring the opposition right back, or sometimes a centre back if it's a back three. This is obviously so that he's ahead of the ball when it breaks. He's France's most important tool in transition. However, playing in that role does have a few knock-on effects. So the first is for Griezmann. And Griezmann has to become a midfielder off the ball for France. And to be fair, he is a midfielder in this team. He's not really a number 10, he is pretty much a number 8. So if you imagine a midfield 4 of Dembele on the right, who does drop back, then Griezmann also dropping back, Tchouaméni, and then the other 8, which has mainly been Rabiot. So in this system, Griezmann does have to perform as a midfielder, and he does very midfielder things. So he has to do a man-marking job. He's doing a lot of breaking up play, in very deep positions as well. And this is something that he's been doing excellently. That helps France a lot in their transition strategy. They are a transition-heavy team. They do a lot of counter-attacks. And Griezmann isn't just great at winning the ball back, but it's the moment of transition where he shows great composure to keep it. whether that's a one-touch pass into someone in space or finding a way out of a tight situation. You know, he's got great long passing and vision, so he can switch it out to Mbappe or whoever else. He's just really useful at turning sort of congested turnover situations into either comfortable possession for France, or more importantly, just an immediate threat on the break. But before we talk about France going forward, I should just wrap up the defensive side of things by talking about probably their main weakness, because the dynamic of Mbappe staying higher up, even with Griezmann dropping, means that France's left side is understaffed compared to the right. That left-sided midfielder, so Rabiot or Fofana, is sort of doing two jobs, covering the opponent's attacking midfielder and then shifting across to help out his fullback. So to use that England game as an example, when Henderson was playing more as an 8, Rabiot had to come across and mark him, but then when the ball goes out wide to Saka, the right winger, Rabiot has to come across and help the left back Theo Hernandez. That does mean, though, for the opposition teams, that if you move the ball well enough, it's not that difficult to isolate your winger against Theo Hernandez, either creating a 1v1 or a 2v2, or even a 3v2 sometimes. So England were doing that a lot with Saka and Kane. Morocco were using their right-hand side with Unahi, Ziyech and Hakimi. And it's no coincidence that in both of these games, a lot of the joy against the French came down their left-hand side. France's response to this is usually to just drop a load of players into the box. Tchouaméni will come across to help make up the numbers, but Griezmann will drop into the box, Dembele even will drop into the box. And I suppose this is the risky part of the French strategy, because it just does come down to last-ditch defending in your own penalty area, which is why they look shaky at times. They are just defending their box, and, you know, teams can get a lot of pressure, put a lot of pressure on them by just getting the ball into those areas. And they have to defend last ditch. But so far, they have survived, and whether that continues against Argentina remains to be seen. But yeah, that is what France do defensively, and it's been effective so far. They're not worried about pressing your defenders. They will defend behind the ball in a mid-block. Man-to-man pressing makes it difficult to progress, but then they can defend pretty deep if they have to. Offensively, it's a lot more self-explanatory. They've got two very direct wingers in Mbappe and Dembele, so they tend to go wide a lot, attack the fullback, get balls into the box. Mbappe sometimes gets help from Theo Hernandez on the left, but Dembele on the right is a bit more of a one-man army, taking on the fullback and getting crosses into Giroud. A lot goes through Griezmann as well, and then into Giroud. So it's pretty direct, but obviously quite effective. It's also no coincidence at all that the French have scored a lot of goals towards the end of games, particularly when they're already ahead and space opens up. Mbappe somehow retains his light speed all the way up to the final whistle. So running against tired legs, he's just absolutely devastating. And yeah, that's France in a nutshell. Defensively, very well organised, though not without their weakness, especially on that left-hand side, but capable of creating moments of quality basically from anywhere on the pitch, and that's what makes them so dangerous. So, on to Argentina, and obviously I made a preview about them before the tournament started, so I don't need to do a full breakdown, but since then there have been a couple of changes to the team that was so good in qualifying, particularly with the blossoming of two young talents in Enzo Fernandez and Julian Alvarez, who are now absolute staples in this team and have been performing at a very high level. Actually, I should add McAllister to that list as well. He's only 23 and has become the Lo Celso replacement. So McAllister and Enzo, for me, have brought real quality and composure, actually, to that midfield. The defensive side of their game is sufficiently Argentinian. We talked in the preview about how important 1v1 duels are in this Argentinian defence. You know, the centre-back stepping up to close down forwards. The midfielders are often man-marking. It's not a, well-drilled zonal system. They are very reliant on those duels to remain solid. And Enzo and McAllister have definitely maintained that. But they've also added a real dose of composure and awareness to this midfield. And then up top, Alvarez has been a revelation. I really thought that Lautaro Martinez would be super important in this tournament, but he didn't have the most polished start. So Alvarez has come in, and really he can do it all as a centre-forward. He's a great runner, a great outlet in transition. He's dropping in to make combinations with Messi, and he's generally always there to finish off chances in the box. That said, though, this tournament for Argentina has really all been about Messi. And we said in the preview that he was the heart and soul of the attacking system. Well, he really just is the attacking system. He's responsible for deep playmaking, for final third playmaking. He's directing players where to go, he's scoring goals, and he's turning tight tactical games in Argentina's favour with moments of just astonishing brilliance. That goal against Mexico, tournament altering. The assist against the Netherlands, just absolutely ridiculous. The same goes for the assist against Croatia. And considering most of these actions have their genesis on the right, and we just talked about the French weakness on the left, this is a pretty good time to segue into the tactical battle between these two teams. I think from the French perspective, it's pretty clear. I'd be surprised if Deschamps changes the system. I think they believe in their ability to hurt Argentina as they can hurt anyone. And I would imagine it'll be the standard game plan from them, really. Let Argentina have the ball, try and crowd out Messi, and then hit them in transition. They can obviously build up through the lines, and, if it's 0-0, they won't shy away from doing that. But I would suspect that this game comes down to moments of transition, of disruption. In terms of how they set up specifically for this game, it's possible Tchouaméni will be coming over a lot more to the left in order to help that weakness. We might even see some kind of man-marking job on Messi, but I don't think they'll be committing too many players forward. Just get it out to Mbappe and Dembele, see what they can do. They have the option of going direct to Giroud, so, there probably will be a lot of turnovers, and they don't really want a lot of possession in this game. What France won't want is the situation that Croatia faced, who had a lot of the ball against Argentina, but then, they were getting hit in transition themselves. It's more dangerous to give Messi and Alvarez that space in transition than it is to sit back against them, probably. That's a little bit questionable, but probably. So I do expect France to sit back and be direct. They could be a bit more aggressive for the first 10-15 minutes. They definitely could. They could try and pile the pressure on Argentina and look for an early goal, because if France were to get an early goal, that would be absolutely huge. But we'll see. That for me is probably Deschamps' only real call. How aggressive do you want to be in the first 10 minutes? Because after that, they're going to sit back. They will try not to concede, and they'll be very direct. I think the much more interesting tactical questions fall to Scaloni and Argentina, because they have a couple of options. They've played both a back five and a back four in this tournament, with different variations of both as well. But the decision for this game is going to be crucial, I think. I've agonised over what would be the better system. I'm sure Scaloni must have as well. I put a poll out on Twitter, and it was pretty close between whether he should play a back four or back five. There are so many things to consider, but to make this digestible, I'll just try and list the pros and cons of each setup. And you can let me know in the comments what you think the right move is. So starting with five at the back, I think this is more likely. Main reason being, it's easier to manage the French wingers, who really are the biggest threat. You cover the full width of the pitch, you can double up on them with your centre-back or even your midfielder. You're not worried too much about the French midfielders having it in front of you in central areas, as long as you're tight to Griezmann. If you're really worried about an overload in midfield, you could maybe drop Julian Alvarez onto Tchouaméni. But this would be the system that is concerned with not conceding. Offensively, I suppose you can feel a little bit safer about pushing the fullbacks up, the wingbacks, particularly Molina, who's been very potent on the right flank, making runs ahead of Messi. So if you were to do that, then you'd have more players behind the ball in a five at the back system. You'd probably have at least a 3-2 setup behind him. So for me, this is the go-to if you want to sit back as Argentina. Sit back, let Messi and Alvarez try and break France down. Otherwise, don't commit too many players forward. So similar to the French strategy, I suppose. The problem, I guess, of using this system is that maybe you're not exploiting the weakness on France's left side quite enough. you'd have to drop Di Maria, for example. So maybe you're missing out on those 2v2s or 3v2s. You don't really have a Saka or a Ziyech in your team at that point. The other thing is that you're never going to be completely safe in transition because Milan is going to be pushing up at some point, like we said. So Mbappe might still end up 1v1 against whoever the right centre-back is. But like I said, 5 at the back is more likely in my opinion for the simple reason that you shut down the flanks and you're not conceding a load of space or 1v1 situations to Mbappe against your fullback. The 4 at the back is an interesting alternative, and I imagine it would essentially be a 4-4-2. And I think in some aspects that would be quite bold of Scaloni. While on paper you could still double up on the French wingers, you'd need your wide midfielders to come across and do that. And that's quite a lot of space for a midfield 4 to cover. If you've got Messi and Alvarez up top, I actually posted an image on Twitter of how Argentina set up against Croatia. That 4-4-2 is very narrow, and it's arguably too much space for that midfield to cover. While both England and Morocco played a back 4 against France and did okay, both of those teams had a midfield 5, and that makes it much easier to cover the width of the pitch and double up on those French wingers. 4-4-2 just doesn't have that width. Like we said before, you could drop Alvarez in, make him mark Tchouameni, and then it would be more of a 4-2-3-1, go man-to-man against the French midfield, and that looks a little better, but then, you're losing Alvarez as an outlet. He's a very important runner off the shoulder of the last defender. And if he's marking Tchouameni, you don't get that. There are other benefits to the 4-4-2 though. You could free up Enzo to be a bit more progressive rather than being stuck as a single pivot. You could play Di Maria out wide to attack Theo Hernandez. That would make it a lot harder to double up on Messi. So in short, I think the 4 at the back is like I said, the more bold option, but the option that says we're actually going to come out to try and beat you rather than, we're not going to lose. So, Alvarez would have to be very, very disciplined in that system. The wide midfielders would have to be very disciplined. But if you can get a goal early, maybe it's worth it. I think the best argument in favour of the back 4 is that France have more options to go direct, like we said. They've got a better focal point in Giroud, so they can go long and they'll be conceding possession more. So Argentina are less likely to do that. So maybe it would be naive to think they'll, be able to sit off France and just counter-attack. Maybe Argentina will have more of the ball, and therefore you should use a system that tries to just go at them and beat them. I don't know. For me, it just feels a little bit too exploitable, that 4-4-2, both on the counter-attack and in regular possession. So let me know what you guys think. It is a really tough call. I would go for 5 at the back, but it is very close. In the end though, I'll be honest, all of this tactical talk might be completely irrelevant. We've got Messi on the pitch, we've got Mbappe on the pitch, loads of other incredible players. So it probably is just going to come down to moments. It really will. I think this is going to be a final of supremely fine margins. Mistakes that are punished, mistakes that aren't punished, moments of genius. It's going to be extraordinarily tense, and as it should be. So really looking forward to it. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching or listening. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be back after the final to do a proper tactical breakdown with all the visuals and everything as usual. So I hope to see you back for that. Thanks for sticking with me in this one. And yeah, we'll find out very soon what Scaloni did, what Deschamps did, and of course, who won the World Cup. So until then, take care.